The preoccupation of life after death has been a topic of discussion throughout the ages. Mystics, prophets, and their teachings have been revered, while skeptics view them as charlatans and their words nothing but man-made falsehoods. But what if the stories we've been told are all true?
What if the difference between life and death is a fine line, and the experience of heaven is only a breath away?
What if one man's journey up the staircase is to discover living proof that the soul doesn't die?
My name is Eric Anson. And this is What Matters Most.
Roland Comtois is a nationally acclaimed inspirational speaker, author, and radio host. He's a professional healer and spiritual medium with over 30 years of experience as a gerontology nurse, Reiki master, metaphysical teacher, and grief specialist, as well as the founder of TalkStream Spiritual Radio. His work is currently sought after by television production companies eager to showcase his signature purple papers.
Last month, I had the pleasure of interviewing Roland via Zoom video conferencing. It was an incredible discussion. We covered a lot of ground. And now, roll tape. Welcome, Roland Comtois.
Thank you so much. This is so exciting to be with you. I can't believe we're finally here together. Thank you.
We are, and we've been trying to organize this for some time, so it's really a pleasure to finally meet you.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, so thank you so much.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get into this. Tell me a little bit about your childhood. You were very poor, and your father left when you were very young. How did that affect you?
It was the beginning, really, of an extraordinary journey. It was a marker for me being the man that I am today, because I became very sensitive to the plight of others. As a very young kid, 10 years old, I became sensitive to what other people were going through. I was sensitive to their peaks and valleys, and I lived my life using that compassion as a compass to guide me through the things I was going through to help others.
That's a perfect segue to my next question. Speaking of compasses and direction, was communicating with your deceased grandmother your first glimpse of the other side?
No. It started when I was like 5 or 6 years old. I would walk around the house and my mother would be following me, and she'd say, what are you looking at? I said, well, Mom, can't you see that? And she'd say no. And then she'd let me go about my business, walking around the house, talking to things. But it wasn't until my grandmother passed away that it all changed. I saw her standing in my bedroom, second floor, middle bedroom, 858 Vernon Street, Woonsocket, Rhode Island. She was there. I saw her as clearly as I can see you, and I knew somehow as a 10-year-old kid that she was all right, that she was peaceful, that the distress that I remembered in her face wasn't there anymore.
Okay, so what you're saying is, I see dead people is not just a line from a famous Hollywood movie, right?
Yeah. Not in my world, that's for sure.
Didn't that freak you out at all, seeing dead people? I understand she was your grandmother, but, well, actually, did you know you were seeing your grandmother?
Well, I know she died 3 days before. I know I went to her wake. I know we went to her funeral. And then to see her there, I got to tell you, I was not afraid. I was comforted. I was comforted by her words, by the energy that I was feeling in the room. I mean, I was a 10-year-old kid connecting or feeling the presence of my deceased grandmother. I did not become fearful at all. It wasn't until later in life I got frightened by the experience.
Another experience. Tell me about joining a local choir and how that changed your life.
You know, I founded the Singing Hearts Choir because I wanted to help the kids that were in the same position as I was as a child, fatherless, poor, living in difficult situations. I wanted to somehow shine a light for them so that they wouldn't feel so alone. And I got a few other adults, and we taught these kids how to sing, and then we went to nursing homes and sang for the old people. But you know what was the magic of that, really? it was holding the hand of an elderly person. And this little, I'll never forget this little girl. She was 5 or 6 years old, and she was singing so far off key and she wasn't even saying the right words. And that was perfectly fine, because what happened was this old lady started to get this tear in her eye, and she was reflective about her own children and her own grandchildren. So to me, it was worth whatever we went through to create that experience.
It's my understanding that you went into nursing to help the elderly transition to the light, correct?
I went into nursing because I wanted to help people, really. It became clear to me that I had to work in the geriatric field, because that's where I felt the depth of the connection. I mean, it was extraordinary. Can I just tell you a little story about something that happened with one of my patients? She was an old lady, 95 years old, getting ready to go, and she had been sick for a while. But I will never forget this. I walked into the room, and she reached for me, and we held hands, and she said to me, "I'm never going to forget you." And she thanked me for the things that I had done for her. But the reality is, she changed me. She changed the way that I looked at things, And then I remember her holding my hand. And, I can go back to that memory now, and it does something to me. I get it. It does something to me, and it changes me every time I think about it.
Now, eventually you left nursing and took a chance by opening up a Reiki center. Can you talk about the synchronicity of that process?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you for asking. I was sitting at my desk, and some voice. Have you ever had a voice you can't explain? I mean, this thing happening inside. Maybe the voice was intuition. Maybe the voice was something else. I don't know. There was a voice there, and that voice said to me, "Quit your job." And I said, "No, I got a kid to take care of." And the voice got stronger. And I put it off for a little while. And then a week later, I went to my boss and I said, "I'm giving you my 2-week notice." And she said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I don't know where I'm going, but I know that I'm supposed to do something." So I left my job that day, drove down through a little town in Rhode Island called Harmony, Rhode Island. And there, Mr. Peterson, the guy that used to sell the Christmas trees, was renting a little spot. And I said, "Well, I'm going to go there. I'm going to see what it costs and try to work this out." And then it was just the amount of money I had, paid the first month's rent, and I have been on the road since then. And, obviously I get to have this conversation with you because of that moment.
Do you always trust those voices in your head? I mean, I hear a voice a lot too. And, I like to think it's the universe that's helping me make choices to get to where I want to be, but are you sure you can trust those voices? Because maybe sometimes it's the universe or God or whatever you want to call it, pointing you into in a direction where it's maybe not where you want to be, but it's a lesson that you need to learn.
That's the greatest question any interviewer has ever asked me, because I think that we all have ups and downs, and we all have failures and successes, and I've had as many as the next person along the way. But listening to that intuitive voice, or that connect, whatever you want to call it, listening to it becomes a guide to help you fulfill who you are, why you are, where you are in your life. And then even the detours or the challenges or the obstacles, I think those are as important, really, because we learn something more about ourselves during those particular experiences. We grow, we become stronger, we become more aware, we become more invested in our lives when we have to slip off the side a little bit and then get back on track. So to me, it's a positive experience, even though it's heart-wrenching sometimes.
Do you think that we all leave impressions on each other, and then we then take them into the afterlife?
I love that question. Because just like that little old patient that I was holding her hand, that became an impression that I carry with me, and I can go back to it. So I think that we do leave the impression or the imprint of love on each other, or we have obstacles with certain family members, and those things we have to carry and work out as well. But the fact of the reality of this is, I think love, and this may be a bit cliched for someone, but I think love is the greatest communicator. And I think that the love that we share is the love that we carry. I will never forget holding my mother as she was dying. I will never forget that moment. I will never, ever forget it. And I was there holding her, and all I did was remember all of the love that we exchanged in our lives. And we had some hard days too, by the way. She yelled at me 1,000 times for 1,000 reasons. So it wasn't easy. It didn't matter in that moment. What mattered in that moment was the impression of love that becomes the greatest communicator. So I do think we leave those impressions, imprints everywhere we go. Everywhere we go, I think so.
If I say to you, 16 cents, what would your response be?
I love that question. I mean, you really read my book. Thank you. I love that question because it's all about signs and messages. That's really what the 16 cents is all about. It's about asking for a sign, believing that that sign exists, and then being in a state of gratitude when discovering that sign. So I was in one of those bad places. I was in one of those rough spots, right? And I was asking for a sign. I was asking for something. And then out of nowhere, the 16 cents appears in the strangest way, right? And then I go to the post office thinking that this is going to be even more interesting. There was a check for $50 in the post office after I found the 16 cents, after I asked for a little extra financial support in my world. That's really what it was all about. I asked for some, this is maybe a little too personal, I don't know, but I was asking for some financial help, and there I found 16 cents. I thought the universe was laughing at me. And then all of a sudden in the mailbox was a $50 check from someone who forgot to pay me for something. I took that as a sign that somewhere through this invisible connection between me and whatever exists around me heard my plea, heard my prayer, heard my thought, heard my meditation, heard my whatever. That 16 cents now, that 16 cents is now framed and in my office. And every day I look at it, you know what happens? I have a moment of gratitude that 16 cents came at that moment. So it's all about signs and messages.
Let's talk a little bit about 9/11. All of us remember where we were on that day, even for much time after that. Especially those of us who lived here in the tri-state area, it was very well. Many of us have friends that were affected or passed in 9/11, so it's a very personal experience. What was your experience with 9/11? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I was leaving my house to go to my little tiny center in Harmony, Rhode Island. And when I arrived there, I had this very weird feeling. Weird in my world means I felt a lot of energy. I was seeing something. I felt the presence of spirits around me. I saw images of people that had died. And it was getting stronger and it was getting more overwhelming. And then all of a sudden I felt as if there was a pilot in front of me. At that moment, I called my mentor and teacher, Tulia Kitty, and we started discussing what was going on. And we came to the conclusion that we were feeling the energy of the people that were passing on 9/11. Now, let me tell you something, though. It wasn't just Tulia and I that were having those feelings. There were people all across the board that were having some kind of strange experience at that moment. Friends of mine, people I know, said they started feeling the energy as well. They couldn't articulate it as I did, but they were having their own experience. So it became an understanding that we were feeling the energy of people as they were passing.
Terrible events and tragedies like this, can they help the survivors and the living to learn how to cope and bring us together in healing?
Yeah, the tragedy becomes a teacher itself, really, as painful as that is, because I'm not a father that's lost a child. I'm not in that position that many people are and that many people were on that day. But when I look at that day, the days that followed 9/11, I saw a change in humanity. Humanity stepped up. They picked themselves up. They took a step through their pain, and then they started becoming champions for each other. And I think that was a moment of change for all of us. The tragedy became something for us. I mean, it happens all the time. Every time there's a tragedy, we change. You go online and you read the news, you change when you hear the stories of what other people are going through. And so it allowed us to really, truly step into our humanity. And that's what I understand from it.
Well, driving home one day after working 24 hours, angels surrounded your car and guided you home. Can you tell me about that experience?
Have you ever felt something you can't explain?
Yeah, I have. I do. But then again, I'm not you, so then I either think, wow, I must be going crazy, either that or, boy, I'm really connecting to the universe today.
Right. I had that moment thinking I was going crazy. I would just work 24-hour nursing shift. It was one of the worst winter storms that we had seen in a long time. There was no one who could come in and work, so I was responsible for administering the medicines and taking care of my 63 elderly patients. And then finally, when the shift was done, I didn't have an ounce of energy left. The exhaustion was beyond belief, but I got in my car and I felt that something, as if something was holding me up. And it sounds mysterious or crazy, I don't know. But in the world that I live in, it seems pretty mysterious that something was somehow able to get me from where I was working to my apartment safe and sound. I attribute that to this angelic energy that I was feeling at that moment.
And then there's the journey to heaven. Now, you had a near-death experience. Can you describe that?
That really was something else, I got to tell you. I was at a small event giving messages, talking to people. And then out of nowhere, I leaned on the table and collapsed to the floor. My cousin, who was hosting that with another person, said that my skin was cold like our deceased grandfather some years before. They tried to find my pulse. They could feel nothing. All I know is that there was a light there. I felt the light. I felt unconditional love. I felt the power of that light. It wasn't frightening to me, just like visiting my grandmother many years before that. That wasn't frightening, nor was this. And the thing that was most profound was how powerful that love was at that moment. It was incredible. It was, you know what, really? There's not even one word in the English language that I can give you that can describe to you what that feeling was. I felt surrounded in love, and I was gone. I went to the doctors when I finally came back, and there was no evidence of any problem in my physical body.
Did you see the proverbial white light?
Yes, it was a golden, whitish, bright, brilliant light that just made its way to me. It's like we greeted each other. And then it felt like I walked through a door. And as I walked through a door, I could hear the sound of music. It was this very faint sound in the background there. And I could hear it in my ears. And I remember looking down as I was hearing the sound. I was looking down and I remember stepping onto what felt like the softest, greenest grass. It was so remarkable to me. I was still tall, standing. I could see people moving past me. And then finally, there's my grandmother, Isabel, who was waving to me. And it was as if I was talking to her, but I was talking to her with not my voice, with my heart, with my thoughts, with the feelings of love. That's what happened. And then I came back.
Welcome back. What's it like being Roland Comtois? I mean, you've got your sixth sense, you've got your 16 sense. Can you turn this "I see dead people" thing on and off? Are you constantly getting messages, or can you just say, we're closed for today?
Well, here is a small example of all of the voices I hear in my head. Each one of these purple papers, and it's a thin, one of them is a very thin purple paper, and there are a lot of them here. Each one of them represent a story that I hear, a voice that I hear. I feel a lot, I hear a lot every single day. I can shut it off when it's time to eat supper. I can shut it off when I want to play with my dog. And I'm not bombarded by that energy constantly, but there are moments when the energy is so strong that I can't stop that feeling or that voice from communicating.
Now, are there some messages which just persist and keep repeating, even when you may be playing with your dog, or you've shut your phone off for the day, so to speak, and you've heard the message before, but it just keeps repeating until you respond to it?
Yeah, I'd love to share a story about that. I'll never forget this time. I was just finishing my day. It was 9 o'clock at night. Again, it was worked all day, did a lot of things, helped a lot of people, did a lot of communications. And all of a sudden, this little voice of a young man named Danny was starting to kind of percolate in my head. And it started to get stronger. And he said, call my mother. And I said, no, I'm off. And he got stronger. And I put it off until 9:30 when I just could no longer stop feeling. It was just pressing against me. And so I said, okay, I will. And I went online to someone and I messaged her through social media and I said, I have to talk to you about your son. Are you able to have a conversation? And she said, yes. I pick up the phone, we talk to each other. I tell her what I had to say. And then she said, she could barely talk, honestly, because you know what she was doing? She was just completing the last chapter of her book about her son's journey. She was just typing his name at the moment I'm calling her. Now, was that a coincidence or was the universe communicating? Was something amazing happening in that moment? At least for that mother, and certainly for me, it was amazing to have that opportunity. Absolutely amazing.
Now, everybody has heard about loved ones that have passed on communicating with the living. But what about your cat, your dog, your pet, your bunny, your bird? I mean, your fish?
Well, I'm not a pet psychic, but since my beloved Mabel passed away 17 months ago, and my Lily, who passed a week ago, I am convinced that they're part of our journey, that the love that was shared was more powerful than anything else. And, people have said to me that I have told them about their animals, but I don't remember that necessarily. There's even a story in my new book about someone telling the story about them getting a message about their pet. It's not anything that's as familiar to me, but I know that my Mabel and my Lily are going to greet me when it's my time, because that was tough. That was a tough loss, right? Those are tough losses. So I believe that they are part of us and they remain a part of our experience.
You mentioned Tulia earlier, your mentor. Is she still with us?
No, she passed 10 years ago. She really was an extraordinary human being. You know what she would make me do? As part of my teaching, I'd have to go to her apartment, sit on the couch, and read an entire book of the Bhagavad Gita for Westerners. And I couldn't get off the couch until I understood the entire book, So she was extraordinary. She was a wonderful human being.
You ever get messages from her?
I know she's with me. I got it right here in my heart. She did appear to me once at a hotel in a dream. It was a little strange, but hey, let's face it, I live a strange life. She was there and I feel her and I know she's part of everything. I know she's part of my everything.
The purple papers, which you showed us earlier, can you explain to us what they are and when did you start writing them?
I started about 15 years ago. The first paper that I ever received was from the Walcott family, and I'm still waiting to find the Walcott family. And these purple papers have been to 3 countries and traveled across this country, and I have not yet been able to find those family members. But each paper tells a story with someone's first name or their last name. For example, there's a paper from a Mr. Manzoni and a Helen St. Pierre and a Mr. Thibodeau. I have no idea who these people are, but each one of them tells their story, the story of their lives here and the afterlife message they're trying to deliver.
The message that the purple papers are about, love, being present across the board, that seems very simple, when in reality it's not. But is there anything that we could do personally to work towards accomplishing that, kind of bootstrap it?
One of the first things I tell everybody is to really befriend silence. It's to really get quiet inside. Now, that's a hard thing to do. I have ADD, ADHD. It's hard for me to get silent and quiet. And then I have 1,000 voices and all these feelings moving around me at the same time. But I know that every time I get into that kind of quiet, silent space, I'm able to feel the energy, the universal energy, much more clearly. So being in a place of silence is very important. I should share the second important thing, because this also happens to a lot of people. When they get a message, they start negotiating that message. Like, oh my God, you pray really hard for it. And then it comes, and then you begin a negotiation, asking all over again if that was you sending a sign or a message. So I would say, find silence and let it be what it is.
And speaking of purple papers, your latest book is Signs of Spirit, Purple Papers, and the Stories Behind Them. Has that been released yet?
That book is coming out on August 8th by Llewellyn Worldwide. It's a book about 45 stories telling the purple paper story from the perspective of the person who passed and the person the loved ones that remain. It is not told from the perspective of a medium. So my voice is primarily silent except for the first and last chapters of the book. It's really a storytelling book.
Are these purple papers, are they meant to be a sign for those of us that are, or for the people that they're meant for, that their loved ones are around them, that there is life after death? Or is it meant more to be instructional for the living, where the loved ones, or the people that have passed on, are trying to give their loved ones that are still living a message or direction? So is it a sign or is it instruction?
I think it's all of that, really. I think that there's a lot of things happening. When the message comes, it gives us hope that we live on, that love is eternal, that the impressions mattered, the love that we shared mattered. The messages also present moments of forgiveness. I will never forget giving a purple paper to a woman whose father was abusive to her, and the reaction she had when she heard the words written on the paper. It changed her in some way, So it's about forgiveness. It's about letting go. There is a lot about these papers that compliment people about what they did for someone when they were passing away. And some of it is also about their afterlife journey, meaning, they're resting, they're peaceful, they're calm, they're with you, they're near you, they're guiding you, all of those kinds of things.
And it seems like your own near-death experience is kind of like a purple paper for all of us. Didn't you actually create a live stage show based on your near-death experiences?
Yeah, so the show is called Through the Door. It formerly was called Heaven Be Experienced, but it's Through the Door now. And I share with the audience the experience I had as I was passing and the lessons that I learned in that space, right? The lessons that we really have to love each other now. I mean, that was really one of the most incredible moments. There were 1,000 lessons, the lessons that we live on, the lessons that we are gathered together there, the lessons that we continue to expand and grow. But the thing that was so profound was the idea, the concept, the experience of loving each other right now at this particular moment, because that love becomes the catalyst for the conversation after someone passes.
Okay, go with me on this. Do you think a near-death experience is the same as when it's really our time, but it's just cut off short? What I mean is, like, it's kind of like a coming attraction. you know what I'm getting at? It's not the whole movie, but it's the beginning of it or part of it or the exciting parts. Or do you think that the universe knows that it's not your time, so it's a completely different experience? It's not what it's like to actually die. It's a near-death experience.
Well, it was like a sneak peek, really, into that space, but it was still that awe-inspiring experience. One of the other things that I remember is that when I was there, I knew there was more, but I couldn't access that more because they said, as many people who have had near-death experience have heard, it's time, you have to go back. And I fought with having to go back. I said, just let me stay here. It'll be easier. And then all of a sudden, my pulse is back. I have color again. And then, I'm fine through that process. So it was a sneak peek into something.
All right. So life is rough, right? This is hell. The good stuff is coming, right?
I think the big lesson is that this life is extraordinary. It's how we make it extraordinary. It's how we leave those imprints and those impressions so that we carry them in our lives. I mean, I remember one of the things I remember thinking to myself, I wondered if Earth was as beautiful as heaven. And then when I came back, I remember seeing how beautiful it was, that somehow I didn't see it as beautiful before. It solidified for me my ability and my understanding, I should say, of the afterlife, of the universe. I mean, the whole thing is so huge, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, well, it is all interconnected, isn't it? I mean, the afterlife or heaven, whatever you want to call it, it's all part of the universe. It's all part of that energy, is it not?
It's all connected. It's all interconnected by invisible pathways and who knows what. And it's all interconnected in some way. You're right. You're absolutely right about that.
So you shouldn't be afraid of dying.
That is the lesson. We shouldn't be afraid of dying, but we're human beings, and human beings are afraid of the unknown. And we're afraid of what we can't see, feel, sense, or hear. But in fact, there is something there. The lesson is also that we have to live our lives fully invested. I don't think we should want to leave. I think we should want to live and really live fully in each of our moments of our lives.
Well, that's a perfect lead-in to the final question that we always ask each of our guests. What matters most to you? What do you want to be remembered for?
Compassion, kindness, someone who reminded us to love, to step beyond our fears, and to really cherish each other and love each other as best as you can in the world that we live in the human experiences that we are, but really, truly to love each other. It's simple. I think we should just be kind. And if someone says that guy was kind to me, then I think I've done a good job.
That's our tagline, the simple things in life. That was a very beautiful and well put answer.
Thank you.
What can I say, Roland? This interview was educational. It was inspirational. You were such a very genuine soul. Your book, by the way, is wonderful. We just thank you so much for being with us here today.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to it. And thanks for the great questions. And hey, P.S., thanks for reading my books. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Books are meant to be read, right?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Roland Comtois, father, truth seeker, spiritualist. He spent a lifetime of service healing broken hearts, helping loved ones transition to the other side, and passing along their messages so that we know we are never alone. He shares a message that love never dies and we will be reunited, reminding us all, once again, the simple things in life are truly what matters most. Namaste.